heads up at the start. In the next videos, I'll keep referring back to stuff I already said in part 1. Otherwise, I'd have to repeat myself every single time. I'd lose the thread, and it would stop making sense. I'm always talking about the same thing anyway. But there are a few basics that are important at the beginning, and I'll keep pointing back to them. A couple hours ago, walking from the co-working space back to my apartment, a few young women came towards me with flowers in their hands. One of them immediately walked straight up to me. I instantly knew she's going to try to sell me those flowers. She says she's from Lithuania doing Erasmus, so my first thought, she's learning how to be self-employed by annoying strangers. She goes, "I'll just walk with you." We start climbing the hill to my place. Sun is blasting, and she follows me for 20 to 25 minutes while I rant the whole time about how annoying marketing is, what it actually means to wake up every morning as a self-employed person and do something that might pay off in a few months or might not. I didn't let her get a word in, she just listened. At the end, she of course asks if I have some cash for the flowers. I go, "Nah, no cash. My generation doesn't carry cash anymore." And she was gone. If she understood why I roasted her for half an hour and then gave her nothing despite her effort, then she got the message. I just wanted a bit of fun. But maybe she actually learned it. As a self-employed person, you invest time and money and sacrifice everything without knowing if you'll ever get anything back. But if you don't act like an idiot, you'll get something eventually. If you last long enough. With the whole Dreamworld thing, waking up inside the Dreamworld like Neo in the Matrix, you get nothing at the end. No money, no eternal bliss, no applause, no recognition. In fact, for most people, you just become a threat. So you better keep a low profile. You get nothing. Not even the fulfillment or living your potential or opening your chakras or reaching nirvana, whatever the hell that means. Waking up in the dream world is, after a few years, pretty thankless compared to being self-employed. Being self-employed is playing with fire. You could just as easily stay in a job where you know exactly what lands in your bank account every month, but you invest time, creativity, your skill, and maybe get fired, or you go self-employed. Odds are lower. You never know when or how it works. Everyone tells you how it works. You never know if you're doing it right or wrong. If you're a bit more mature, you eventually realize there is no right or wrong. And when you're awake in the dream world, you know exactly what to do. Because you know everything. Not much, but you simply know how things work. That's what a lot of people call intuition. But in the end, it's usually just old patterns, repetition, compulsion, just pain avoidance or pain repetition. Nothing to do with universal intelligence you supposedly reach once you're there. The gifts you get after sacrificing everything, you need a very long leash for that. You have to be able to endure a lot without knowing when or if you'll ever get anything. That you get something is relatively likely if you hold out long enough. Maybe a few years, maybe a few months. If you're ruthless and have no morals, maybe a few days. Depends on how much morality, empathy, intelligence, talent, time, and starting capital you have. If you start from zero in self-employment, you'll get something eventually. With the thing I'm talking about here, where I'm speaking to maybe 1 in a million, you get nothing at the end. That's why we have to distinguish between 2 completely different paths. 1, waking up in the dream world. Individual path for everyone, but the result is the same. Nothing. You don't give anything away. You just get nothing in return. 2, just becoming a mature adult. You don't really get anything either, but you can keep some of your illusions. You can still be around people without feeling such massive dissonance that it hurts. You can function in society. You don't have to let go of all attachment to the past. You drop the unpleasant attachments and get to keep the pleasant ones. When you walk up the mountain, mountain equals the journey. Maya and ego tend to cling somewhere. That's what I call attachment. Clinging to ideas, beliefs, past, worries, hopes. I never did that, so I lost all attachments in the end. Huge advantages, but sometimes I'd love to have a few back. When you let go of the unpleasant attachments, the pleasant ones go automatically. On the flip side, everything that happened to me in the past no longer hangs on me emotionally. All ropes are cut. There's only this, walking and talking. That's it. You might not even remember tomorrow what I said here. I'll watch it and it'll feel like someone else said it. No more emotional friction when you're awake. No more anticipation either. If I actually went to the cinema tomorrow, zero anticipation. I'd enjoy the film while I'm there, then it's over, but not before. Same with worries, hopes, fears, gone. Things happen when they happen, and even then, they don't rattle me. If one thing goes, the other has to go too. It's not conscious letting go, it just happens, and there's no way back. It takes months, sometimes years to live with the consequences. But it doesn't happen by accident, it happens with full intent. You prepare for it, and then you can live with it. That's the journey very few take, maybe 1 in a million. The journey from immature to mature adult is slower, you're more scared of what's coming, and you don't experience what I experienced. All of it with full intent. I didn't want to sleep anymore, in quotes. Sleeping meaning being conditioned, not knowing that I'm actually imagining everything, that everything is just a reality on my inner screen, and all the unpleasant attachments that come with it. The pleasant ones had to go too. Attachment to past and future, meaning the illusion of time is gone in the end. Time can only exist when you're trapped in the dream world. For me, there is no time anymore. Not something you work toward. It just happens alongside. Time is part of the dream world, just like matter. When you're awake in the dream world, time disappears. For you, not for others. Matter loses its value too, even if we still assign it one. Important, we're looking at 2 completely different paths now. Everyone is born with the DNA for one of them. If you wake up in the dream world, you automatically become a mature adult too. If you become a mature adult, you don't necessarily wake up in the dream world. I was born to wake up in the dream world, and with that also become a mature adult. The process keeps going every day, but not as intense as the actual dream world awakening. Others were born to go from immature to mature adult, loosen their herd behavior, fear and ego a bit, as far as they want, always with the realization that they don't have to do anything, don't have to strain or change, that they're in their camp and can develop inside their camp because they don't have the DNA to climb the mountain and jump into the volcano like I did in the analogy. The masses stay forever in the immature, separated state, like children in adult bodies. Born with it, die with it. Maybe you're one of them. But the fact you're watching this video suggests the opposite. There's a tendency that you want to become a mature adult or are already in the process. The probability that you want to wake up in the dream world and become a mature adult is extremely low. You can, of course, transfer the dream world thing to any other area. It is very likely, no, it is absolutely necessary to be awake in the dream world to achieve exceptional performance in your profession. The two go hand in hand, meaning if you weren't born with a profession and the hatred of not being awake in the dream world, you will never become a legend in your field, plain and simple. Chasing it and pretending you were born for it only has ego and fear motives, wanting to be special, get recognition, compensate pain. Exactly those motives have to be dropped to wake up. It contradicts itself. The ones who are truly exceptional, 1 in a million, were born with the DNA for their profession, and at the same time with the DNA to wake up in the dream world. Both together create the real legends people still talk about in 100 years. and there are far fewer of them than just the ones who wake up. For everyone else, it's both liberation and sobering. Liberation because you no longer have to chase illusions. Sobering because you no longer get to chase illusions. It's important to make the distinction between the states. Otherwise, the mind turns waking up in the dream world into another concept to chase. Because it chases everything. In the self-help industry, everything is chased, and we're sold that anyone can become anything. That's not how it works. And like I said at the beginning, waking up in the dream world isn't something you get. It's a side effect you get because the hatred of not being awake is so massive. But it's not a thing like the self-employed person maybe gets money at the end, which also isn't guaranteed. Whoever wakes up gets nothing, and you can't aim for nothing. The mind has a tendency to aim for everything because that's exactly what keeps you from getting it. Everything you chase runs away from you. If you turn nothing into a concept to chase, you'll never get it, of course. Concepts are only imitations of truth, never the truth itself. Truth always has to do with intent, DNA, hatred, really wanting to understand, not just being interested. And that's nothing you get in the end. It's things that get subtracted. Irrational fears, for example. I have no irrational fears anymore. Rational fears, yes, if a bear shows up right now, I'll probably run or play dead. But no irrational ones, no emotional attachment to the past anymore. You can repress things and claim you have none, or you cut the rope for real. Not a conscious process, just happens on the way. Then comes the free fall at some point. Free fall means you've reached the top of the mountain after doing all the work because you couldn't stand it anymore. Like Neo couldn't stand being a wage slave in a boring world. Then you jump in. Jumping in is the moment there's no way back. Very free fall. You fall and fall. At some point comes what many call singularity. You basically get torn apart inside. The last resistance is different for everyone. That's why it doesn't help if I tell you exactly what I realized. It's different for everyone. I had only the intention to go further. That was the very last step you have to take. The weeks and months before were already different, but from that moment I knew. Then it was just about surviving the next months in the world. And that's the relatively unspectacular but also pretty pleasant state that the self-help industry turns into a concept and sells you, telling you could reach it with a few meditation exercises or by sticking your right leg behind your head, which is the exact opposite. First, you have to recognize whether you were born for it. You were always a lone wolf, always a bit separated from society, always questioned systems that were only created to keep immature adults in check. You could never stand how things are, not just interest, but real obsessive behavior, either writing everything down or working with someone like me. Or it was never like that. Society wasn't great, but also not really unpleasant. No strong introvert tendencies, totally fine not being alone. I'm alone 99.9% of the time. If that's not you, the path simply isn't open, and that's okay. Being awake doesn't mean I achieved something better than others. Quite the opposite. I have to learn to live with it more than others, and accept more because I simply can't do certain things anymore. Otherwise, the dissonance between what's true and what others believe is true becomes too strong. You have to build your own little dream world inside a world that isn't made for people like that. For everyone else who doesn't have a massive aversion to society, but also doesn't feel drawn to it, who senses something is off, has a bit of system criticism, and engages with these topics. Mostly people who spent years in self-help and never got anywhere, just endless searching. For them, the price is lower. They don't let go of everything, some attachments stay. That's the nature of the thing. As long as you're not awake in the dream world, worries, hopes, irrational fears remain to a certain degree. If you can't stand it anymore, you can keep going as far as your fuel lasts. The fuel is always the hatred of how things are. In the end, the question is, what were you born with? What patterns have always run through your life? How strong is the hatred of how things are? It's either 10,000 out of 10,000 or 0. If you feel it's a 1,000, it's a 0. There is no middle ground in truth. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000, 9,000, all 0. At 9,000, it starts to get possible to push yourself to 10,000. And what profession, what DNA did you bring? Doesn't have to be exceptional. If it's not exceptional, it isn't. If it wasn't always there, it never was. Maybe there are little things you want to put into the world. But not everyone becomes a legend. And not everyone can. Because for most, the hatred of not being one isn't strong enough. Then your task is rather to arrive where you already are. Stop chasing the wind. Stop chasing things where the hatred of the status quo isn't strong enough. And develop right where you are. That doesn't mean you can't still become a mature adult there. Detach a bit from the herd's influence. Get your ego under control. Get rid of most irrational fears. And none of that has anything to do with having to do something. Neither waking up in the dream world, nor becoming a legend in your profession, nor becoming a mature adult. Nothing has to do with doing, learning, understanding, straining, intellectualizing, or building fantasy constructs. Nothing.